Welcome to this episode of our program Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing contentious debate. Today we'll be discussing the visit of President Fattah al-Sisi to Portugal, the first of its kind or the first by an Egyptian president to Portugal in 20 years. President Fattah al-Sisi arrived in the Portuguese capital, Lisbon, for the first official visit to the country following the inauguration of Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa as president in March. Today, President Sisi met the Portuguese president, the Portuguese parliament speaker, the prime minister, as well as Lisbon's mayor. In June, Portugal's foreign affairs minister, Augusto Santos Silva, visited Cairo and extended an invitation to al-Sisi on behalf of the Portuguese president to visit the Portuguese capital. Ahead of the visit, the Portuguese ambassador in Cairo said that several Portuguese companies have shown interest in taking advantage of investment opportunities available in the Egyptian market, especially after the latest economic measures adopted in the country. Of course, we will be speaking about the significance of this visit. What kind of spheres does it open in front of both countries? What kind of cooperation can we really find? Bilateral, of course, exchange, speaking about trade, speaking about economic, even on the political and other aspects. All this we'll be discussing later on in our show. Before we proceed on with our discussion, first let's have this quick look on the Egyptian president's visit, the activities that were carried out, and we'll come back for discussion.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had talks on Monday with his Portuguese counterpart Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa in the Portuguese capital Lisbon over boosting bilateral ties. The summit also explored ways of fighting terrorism as well as tackling developments in the major issues in the Middle East. After the talks, both leaders held joint press conference where the President al-Sisi expressed his happiness to visit Lisbon city, stressing on his keen interest to strengthen bilateral relations. Al-Sisi also expressed his appreciation to Portugal's supportive stance towards the democratic transformation in Egypt. Moreover, the head of state stressed that the last period had witnessed a noticeable development in the relationships between both countries. Al-Sisi then met with the Portuguese Prime Minister. Earlier today, President Al-Sisi has visited the Jerónimos Monastery in Lisbon and laid a wreath on the tomb of late Portuguese poet Luís Vaz de Camões, who is considered the most prominent poet in the Portuguese history and the founder of the Portuguese language. Scheduled for Tuesday, President al-Sisi will meet with the several Portuguese businessmen to discuss fostering joint investments in the fields of new and renewable energy, construction, information technology, telecommunications and maritime transportation. President al-Sisi has arrived on Sunday in Portugal for a 3-day official visit. The visit is the first official one by an Egyptian president to Portugal since over 20 years. It's also the first one hosted by Portugal since the inauguration of de Sousa in March.
Yes, this was a brief report on the activities of the president that took place since yesterday. I guess to highlight more the activities during the day, we have with us over the phone our correspondent there with the president, Linda Abdulatif. Linda. Hello.
Good evening, Mona.
Good evening to you, Linda. And tell me about the activities of the president today and the aspects of the visit as you see it.
Sorry, what was the last part of the question, Mona?
And the aspects of the visit.
Yes.
What kind of aspects did it open? Yes, please.
Well, Mona, President of the Fattah al-Sisi started off today his official visit to the Portuguese capital, Lisbon. The president's first destination was the Jerónimos Cathedral, where he was received by Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, where the welcoming ceremony took place. Now, following the welcoming ceremony, the president took a tour at the cathedral and put flowers at the tomb of the famous Portuguese poet Luís Camões. And afterwards, President al-Sisi headed to the Belém Palace, where he held a joint meeting with the Portuguese President that was followed by an expanded meeting that was attended by officials from both countries. Now, following that, the two leaders held a joint press conference, and for his part, President Sisi praised the friendly welcoming that he has received, adding that Egypt has undergone changes in the last period that have shaped new hopes of change, democracy and development. And in that regard, President Sisi expressed his appreciation for the Portuguese position towards Egypt's democratic transition, adding that such a visit will be a quantum leap in the economic relations between both countries. Mona, especially that you've seen, or you might have known, of course, that President Abdullah Sisi, this visit is the first Egyptian presidential visit to Portugal since 24 years, rather. So you could actually imagine how this is a historical one indeed. Now, the president also added that he's very pleased with agreeing on the importance of putting the required framework to implement projects in the different fields through following the activation of the Joint Committee for Economic Cooperation, which will hold its first meeting in Egypt soon. Now, President Sisi also called Portuguese investors to make use of the investment incentives provided by the Egyptian government in light of the new investment law and within the distinguished opportunities provided by development projects in Egypt, on top of which are the development projects in the Suez Canal area. Now, President Sisi also spoke about the geographical proximity of both countries, which imposes coordination between both sides. And now, Mona, we're right now heading and getting ready to head to the Ajuda Palace, so where President Abdullah Sisi is expected to be delivering a speech along with the Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, and both presidents will be having dinner there. Now, we're actually on our way right now, getting ready.
Just before you go, Linda, since you said, and we've said in the report, this is the first visit by an Egyptian president to Portugal since or in 20 years. How was the reception of the Portuguese...
Mona, could you please repeat the question?
So again, Linda, as we said that this is the first visit of an Egyptian president to the Portuguese capital. How was the reception of the Portuguese president to the president? What kind of opportunities does this open? How do you view the...
Well, Mona, yes, as you've mentioned, it is an exceptional visit because it hasn't been done since 24 years. So yes, a number of different welcoming ceremonies took place actually at the different places that President Abdullah Sisi has been to today. And actually, the Portuguese president has actually said that he's very happy with the presence of President Abdullah Sisi in the Portuguese capital, Lisbon, and also all the other officials that he today stressed on that point, saying that both countries indeed have strong and friendly relations, and that such a visit that comes after 24 years is expected to be a quantum leap in the bilateral relations between both countries. Yes. You might have listened to President Abdullah Sisi saying during the conference and calling the Portuguese investors to invest in the different sectors, especially in the sectors that the Portuguese excel in, which are the infrastructure, and that, he said, included transportation, sea freight, and also that besides the renewable energy. President Abdullah Sisi also called the Portuguese investors to invest in the country and said that he's expecting them to invest in light of the investment, the new investment law and the investment incentives that are provided by the new investment law, and said that there are a number of opportunities for the investors, especially in the Suez Canal development area project.
Right, so Linda Abdulatif from Portugal, we thank you very much for joining us over the phone. Let me get back to you, and before we proceed on with discussion with our distinguished guests, here let me have this interview that Linda has conducted yesterday with Minister of Trade and Industry Tariq Qabil, in which he spoke about the extent of economic cooperation between bilateral cooperation between Egypt and Portugal, opportunities, exports to the Portugal, and investments. The Portuguese have shown interest in in contributing to or in here in Egypt. So let's watch this report and we'll come back for discussion.
On the sidelines of the visit of President Abdel al-Sisi to Portugal, I'm being joined right now by Minister of Trade and Industry, Engineer Tarek Kabil. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us today on Nile TV International.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Let's start off first, sir, with how do you see the significance of this visit?
I think it's a very, very important visit. It's the first visit since more than 30 years of Egyptian president to Portugal. Portugal, we have historically a very positive relationship. You know, they were probably one of the first countries supported the revolution of 30th of June. So it has a very important political element, as well as it's part of the Mediterranean, and we have a very good relation with most of the Mediterranean countries, including Spain, France, even Italy and Greece. But it has also an important commercial short-term and longer-term benefits. Short-term, we have an advantage of increasing our trade between both countries. Last year total trade was about 194 million, so 60% was export of Portugal to Egypt and 40% the other way around. This year, it was flipped the other way, so 70% export of Egypt to Portugal and 30% the other way around. We have, more importantly than increasing the trade, increasing the investment. 40% of our export to Portugal is leather, and you know that we're building a leather city, and we started already communication with many of the Portuguese companies to invest in using the raw material and transferring it into finished product. The other important element is using the strong relationship between Portugal and some of the countries in Africa, including Mozambique, Guinea, who speaks Portuguese, so they have a very strong tie. More importantly, we have signed the Mercosur agreement in Latin America. Specifically Brazil as the biggest trade partner to Portugal, and they have a very strong tie because of the language as well. So we can use Portugal as the bridge to Latin America, and they can use Egypt as the bridge to East Africa. So there is a lot of common grounds that we can build on, both on trade level as well as investment.
And which sectors are the Portuguese investors most interested in investing in Egypt, of course?
They have already currently investment in cement, in IT sectors, programming and softwares. On the other side, we're exporting spare parts for cars, leather, textile.
And what about Egypt? Which sector is it most interested in investing in Portugal?
We have most of the investment, the Egyptian investment in Portugal, in the real estate side. So that's up to the private sector to decide which way to go.
Now, the Suez Canal area as a trade hub and the new Suez Canal project as a trade hub, what are your expectations regarding to what extent it will be attracting Portuguese investors to come and invest in the Suez Canal development project or economic zone?
As I mentioned, if the Suez Canal will be a great hub for them, using Egypt as a base to reach COMESA, which is all the entire East Africa, as well as the GCC. So I think we're placed in a great location to service that. But also, more importantly, there are global players who are investing in Suez Canal, like Maersk and others, who are servicing the entire EU. They're using also that. So not necessarily they invest directly in Suez Canal, but they can use whoever is investing there as well.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us today on Nile TV International.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right, welcome back, and let me welcome our distinguished guests, Ambassador Hagar Islambouly, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Dr. Salah Abdullah, political and economic expert. Thank you very much for joining us. If I may ask, because that would be a question asked by many, why Portugal? What is Portugal? How important is Portugal?
Portugal is a European country, a member of the European Union, which we have a partnership agreement with. Portugal is part of the southern flank of Europe on the Mediterranean, so ties with the other flank, which is Egypt, part of it, is very important. Historically, relations with Portugal are based on cultural relations which we had historically since the Arab era in Andalusia and all of the Iberian Peninsula. The Iberian Peninsula is Portugal and Spain. Usually Spain is a bigger country, so it's overshadowed in the media of Egypt and is not covered thoroughly Portugal. But Portugal is a member with us in different forums. You have within the Barcelona process, we have the European Union first, we have Barcelona process, we have as well other Mediterranean, the Mediterranean Union, which was led by France and Egypt, are members with us in the European-African dialogue. And all of these forums add to the relations, bilateral relations between Portugal and Egypt. However, I do understand your question because people, they don't hear a lot about Portuguese investments in Egypt, for example, which amounts to almost half a billion of euros in Egypt. Of course, they can do more, and we're looking to have more in that area, especially with their expertise in new areas, new technologies that are related to the solar system, solar energy, wind energy. They have a little expertise in that respect, which can be helpful to us. Again, the Mediterranean flanks, the Mediterranean Sea, have lots of problems right now. We have the issue of terrorism leading the agenda, so we have to coordinate in facing this wave of terrorism moving around, crossing borders all around the Mediterranean.
Ambassador Hagar will speak about the agenda because that is important. If we speak about the significance of President Fattah al-Sisi's visit to Portugal, particularly at this stage, how did you read this visit?
Number one, this is part of President Fattah al-Sisi policy to increase ties and relations with many countries in the world. Yes. Starting from Europe to East to Asia to Africa. Portugal is very important in the European Union. This is number one. Number two, the United Nations came on after he finished, the secretary for the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, after he finished, one politician from Portugal is the follower.
Gutierrez.
Yes,
yes.
And,
Gutierrez,
Egypt, and Egypt was supporting that. Thirdly, there is now the world all now aware about terrorism and fighting of terrorism. President Fattah al-Sisi succeeded in giving the impression, and this is true impression in the world, that he is the head of the arrow in fighting terrorism. That's why you find Trump says, I will be with Sisi. Okay? In France now, if you are following the preparation for the election now, and you see what they say, they are nearly near Trump in the ideas,
Yes.
The first
However,
one
we hope
succeed,
that Le Pen would not be...
Yes. So President Sisi now considered as the man who is truly fighting terrorism. This is number one. Number two, the question of the illegal immigration through the Mediterranean Sea is causing trouble to European countries. So there is many ideas about how to make the countries in the south of the Mediterranean Sea and to protect Europe from illegal immigration by increasing the investment here in Egypt and in Libya and in these countries to decrease the number of the immigrants to Europe. Of course, Portugal is giving this very important. Thirdly, Portugal have an interest in Africa, especially in Mozambique and Angola, since the colonial days. Now we have Suez Canal area. If they invest in this area, this can make the trading very easily to the areas in Africa where the influence of the Portugal is there. So sharing with Egypt in Suez Canal area can be very important to
open the markets
Portugal.
to the African continent at large.
Yes.
Definitely.
So what President Fattah Sisi is doing, he opened markets to Egypt. He opened markets to Egypt. And in fact, he is doing this in a very intelligent way, in my opinion, as a politician.
Returning back to you, Ambassador Hagar, and we are speaking about the agenda of talks. We spoke here about points of interests. Now we have to put the priorities of this could-be agenda. In a few minutes, as Linda said, there will be a kind of reception the Portuguese president has held for President Sisi, which both of them will deliver a speech. But before we know anything about this, we'll have some time. What could be the agenda of their talks? What would be the priorities or the points that really they have to discuss thoroughly?
Well, they have to discuss how to improve relations and to upgrade economic ties, cultural ties, all of this in scientific areas. There are areas of cooperation that